Now, you said you did a lot of research on, there was a paper or a study on like the biggest possible implications on human society or our culture if something was disclosed.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that stood out to you?
So this is research that my colleagues have done, and people can look at it at cosmicconnectors.com. A 70-page report. There are 44 implications that they mapped out. They developed these implications through a series of focus groups by getting small groups of people together and just having them brainstorm and think about what are the possible implications. So what's interesting with what their findings are is that people who don't know anything about the topic, right, don't know much about UFOs or ETs, they tend to just view negative implications occurring as a result of disclosure. Whereas the people who are more educated in the topic, they see a variety of positive implications. So positive implications like, recognizing that we're not alone being a unifying narrative for a globe that's, otherwise in much polarization. The possibility of more funding going into UAP studies and tech, and that there might be, some, results that come out of tech by investing, more funds into this. Some of the kind of things Gary Nolan's trying to do, and other implications would, then there's, like taking abductees and their stories more seriously. So you can go to that website, you can see their report and see all the implications there. But it's nice because it kind of maps out all the different possibilities of like, the economic applications, the educational applications, like how might we have to rewrite our history books in light of, some of these findings, right? Like if in fact we have been visited by non-human presences, for, at least the last 5,000 years, like, what does that say about our religions and our science? And okay, maybe now we can explain the pyramids or whatever, right? Like there could be some pretty, dynamite, things to reconsider in light of a larger galactic narrative that might be emerging, where we realize, like, one, we're not alone, and two, we haven't been alone a long time, and three, there have been ongoing interactions between a variety of beings and ourselves. And I find it very telling that, like, if you listen to what Chris Mellon has been saying, what Gary Nolan has been saying, Lou Elizondo have been saying, over the last 5 years, if you kind of, 4 years, if you track the kinds of statements that they kind of started making after 2017, right, when the New York Times article came out, and that they progressively have moved and like more and more bold, saying basically that we're dealing with a non-human presence that has been on this earth for a very long time. All of them are saying that. All of them are increasingly in more and more bold statements kind of landing on that. They're not saying these are flesh and blood beings from other planets. They're not saying they're necessarily interdimensional, though both of those are probably true. Like some of them are that. But Lou, Chris, Gary, and others seem to be on the same page with being more suggestive that what we're likely dealing with is something that has been on this planet for a long time, and that this is actually their planet, right? Like if anything, we're kind of like the visitors. And so, and you look at all the stuff around the oceans and all the, UFOs that are coming out of the water, right? And you also get reports of them going into mountains, right? So there seem to be bases, underwater and in mountains and, and maybe even just in other dimensions above us, right? So it starts to make you have to reconsider, like, what does it mean to be on this planet? Like, are there other layers or dimensions of this planet that go beyond just our kind of basic physical view of it?
Well, intelligence people like Elizondo, what is their incentive to do this? What the fuck do they care? Like there has to be a good reason for them to want to paint some sort of narrative.
Yeah.
And it seems very controlled the way they're releasing it. Yeah. So why?
Well, I mean, so yeah, I think it is controlled, but I don't think it's controlled by like a single person or a single agency. It's controlled by almost like the complexity of the topic and the fact that they all have worked with the government. They're all aware of, their NDAs. They're aware of national security. They're trying to walk a really fine line, right? So, I think when you look at the institutionalization of secrecy, you start to appreciate and realize like it's a very complex landscape that's not just being driven by one person or one thing. Like there's a lot of kind of contributing factors, and that Mellon and Luizondo and others, they're doing as best they can in that, and Grush, and if anything, they're trying to stimulate the larger populace to demand answers. And so I think we see that successfully with Congress. So we have an interesting division where sections of Congress are really interested in this topic, but they keep getting stonewalled by the Pentagon, right? So that's an interesting development that we now have that. That was not the case a few years ago. I've heard a lot of people, and this was brought up at the Seoul event, in Stanford, that, the next president is likely going to be a UFO president, right? Like this topic is likely to come to a head where whoever is president is going to probably play a big role with some major steps in the disclosure project, either shutting it down or moving it forward. And that like these things are kind of coming to a head, and that, the whole effort around the legislation that got gutted in December was basically to kind of try and set up that possibility so that the presidential candidates campaigning in the fall would have to speak to this topic, right? And like make this a major kind of, issue for their candidacy.
Which president do you think that's running right now as the UFO president?
I don't think it's Trump. Trump doesn't have any interest in the topic at all, as far as I can tell.
If he knew about it, though, he would definitely not keep his mouth shut.
Yeah, I think that.
I don't think our military or our defense contractors would ever let the president know, especially him.
Well, and this is what, like Grant Cameron, who studied the UFO topic in relationship to presidencies, has said in various places that basically the president's a 4-year problem, in the sense that like they just
problem.
They just cycle in and out, and like you don't want to let them know because that they're going to be gone in 4 or 8 years, right? And so it's only lifers who are in those political systems are the ones that are really in the know.
Right.
But there have been presidents that have been briefed to an extent, not much, and so there is a real interesting history around which presidents have known what at which point. But I think it's fair to say none of them have really known much except for the early ones, like Truman and Eisenhower, who were directly involved with creating, what's now thought of as the truth embargo, putting in place the CIA and other mechanisms to kind of manage this until we got a handle on it. And then by that point, it was like, why let the cat out of the bag now? Let's just keep going. Because secrecy has a tendency of replicating itself, right? So it kind of perpetuates its own, self-serving needs.